Hello and welcome back to the game room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. And I'm sure all 1,490 of you guys watching this channel agree with me. But you know what's funny? A lot of people nowadays who talk about games don't seem to like them. Or hell, have a team of people that write what they say. Well, not here. If you want one guy's opinion, well, you came to the right place. And for today's video, I wanted to give a little love to some single-player games, as we've been talking a lot lately about multiplayer games and things of that nature. And the whole onus for this was recently brought to my attention from a re-release that just came out, which we'll get to in a second. But if that sounds like an interesting topic to you, make sure and hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave a comment, and let's jump into it.
There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life. This is my game room.
Alright, first and foremost, what I wanted to talk about, the whole reason why I even thought about this topic in the first place, is an oldie and a goodie. It just got re-released technically, which no one ever saw coming. It's on the Switch Online, and it was for Xbox 3, not Xbox One, the Xbox series of consoles. If you have Rare Replay digitally, you get it for free. And that is one of my favorite games of all time, which is GoldenEye 007 for the N64. Now, I will preface it with this. The Switch Online release, the controls are terrible. Now, there's a very simple fix. I will show you on the screen right now what I did. It's really just changing 2 buttons, making it so that the fire button or the aim button. Anyways, look at what the screen says. So it makes it emulate the N64 control scheme a lot better in my opinion, because strafing is so important, especially if you're going through the single player trying to unlock the cheats and get through the levels fast. You need to strafe left and right. And how on earth they didn't put that right, I don't know. But it's an easy fix. Just bear in mind you're swapping your confirm button when you do what I do here, but it makes the game so much better. People always remember this being a wonderful multiplayer game, which it is. Don't mistake. I played far more multiplayer, but the single player in GoldenEye may have been more enjoyable for me at times. I really, really enjoyed it. Now, bear in mind, going back to when this came out in 97, I think, there was no first-person game like this if you didn't have a PC. And even if you did have a PC, this game had the ability to pick up the guns after you killed the enemies. You could shoot them in different areas, and they had reactions to it. The enemies looked different. You had 3 different difficulty levels that would actually change how you beat the level, as well as change the mechanics of how many hits the enemies took, how many bullets you got from the guns you picked up off the floor, sometimes even the guns you got in the levels. And all in all, it's just a phenomenal single-player experience, which I, to this day, still enjoy. I've gone through and almost beaten the entire thing again up to, I beat it in Secret Agent, beat it on Regular Agent, and I'm working through 00 Agent right now. I'm up to Cradle, or not Cradle, whatever the freaking compound one is where Natalia has to hack the system. And just a really fun single player game. The fact that you can learn the patterns of where the enemies spawn from. They aren't endless. The enemies aren't endless, so if you know the levels, you can anticipate where they're coming from. One of my favorite ones is in Bunker. You know that once you get past the gate place, you have to then turn around and 4 enemies wearing steel helmets will come after you. And I just like the headshotting them all day long. Going through with the stealth PP7 as far as you can until you run out of ammo. Like, these were the things I would enjoy doing. Shooting the scientists, making them jump in the butt, and then pull out a Destoval so you can get more weapons from them, or more ammo for the silenced pistol on them. So many good memories with this game, specifically in single player. And when people go around and say the single player wasn't very good, I don't know what the hell they're talking about. Going through it now, playing it in 2023, I'm still thoroughly enjoying it. Now, maybe it's because I know these levels like the back of my hand, but it's still an experience that I can't get enough of. And unfortunately, outside of the Time Splitter series, games really went away from this. I feel like when Gears of War and the Call of Duty series went to this getting hit enough until you die, otherwise you recover from it, that kind of became the norm. And then these health bar type games just went away. But anyways, like, it went to this loadout meta. Whatever. GoldenEye 007. Very good. If you're playing playing it on the Switch online, change the controller. It's so worth it because my God, is it more fun playing it this way than on a janky ass N64 where it looks terrible, even after all the modifications I've done. All right, fantastic way to start off what we're talking about here. Now, another game that I think is emblematic of what we're talking about from the N64 era again. This is a game that you'll hear about. Everyone talks about these. Now, it's a phenomenal multiplayer game. Don't get me wrong. Almost all these games are going to be phenomenal multiplayer because the single player is an afterthought for almost all of them. But this game, you got to believe me when I say it. The single player in this game was not only fantastic, it was revolutionary. It changed the way single player campaigns were handled in this game series going forward to this day. And that is WWF No Mercy. I know, one of the legendary wrestling games on the N64. The fourth game with the famous Aki engine. Unfortunately, the last one to have it, because then they moved off to Jukes, or whatever, Jax, or whatever the hell, the one that wasn't as good. But the single player in this game is surprisingly deep and varied. You go in there, and if you can pick any of the titles, the world title, the Intercontinental, the European, the women's title, and there is a specific scripted scenario for each, but not only just a scripted scenario that has one branching pathway. We're talking ones that go 30, 40 different routes where you can see stuff you never even thought you'd see, or you may not ever see. And for all the belts, not just the world title. And all very engaging. Even if you lose the match sometimes, the game just continues. It has a straight storyline going on it, and for title defenses as well. And they, unfortunately, when the GameCube came out, and they came out with WrestleMania 18, they really stripped away not only the great combat, but also the story mode was back to the standard. You just have endless matches until you become the champion. But this one really felt like you were following along, watching an episode of Raw or SmackDown or the WWF back in the day. And it's such a shame that we didn't get more like this. Even to this day, the story modes aren't as solid in wrestling games. And I kind of fell off wrestling a long time ago. But maybe if they ever bring back something as good as the Aki engine, who knows. But yes, you might not believe it, but the single player in No Mercy is also very, very good. And you should check it out. All right. Now here's one that a lot of people, if they know, they know. And back in 2009, a series that had been around since the early 90s was kind of on its deathbed. People were over it. It had movies, it had games, it sucked, it moved to 3D. No one cared, no one wanted another one. But God love them, NetherRealm Studios came out with Mortal Kombat. You went back, it's Mortal Kombat 9, but they just called this release Mortal Kombat, and I got it for the 360. Now, it really did save the series, in my opinion, but what really saved it is the fact that they introduced a story mode that pretty much did a remake of almost the first three games' storylines. So if you were familiar with Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3, it played on it. So Sonya was going after Kano. Jax gets his arms ripped off. You have the storyline with the Liu Kang guys, Sector and Cyrax, and then Smoke being taken and turned into a robot. But in this, you change things. You change how it happens. So Smoke doesn't become a robot. Well, if that changes the ripple effect, then what happens? Oh, snap. Sub-Zero becomes a robot. Like, it was such a cool, and it's still a very cool story mode. And yeah, it's a bunch of cutscenes laced around the fighting game, but for someone who, like I said, I'm not a huge fighting game fan, but going through this almost was like a greatest hits of what I expected from the series. You have all the characters that I care about, Shao Kahn, Goro, Ermac, all those kind of guys, Sub-Zero, Smoke, Noob Saibot, but with a better storyline, a new concise storyline. This is when they really revamped the fighting system, and I think it's when they introduced the X-ray fighting system, things of that nature with the really brutal stuff. And it's just a phenomenal game, and since this one, they had Mortal Kombat X, and then XL, and Mortal Kombat 11, and the series has never been better, never been healthier. And a lot of that is because of the changes they made in this, but also because it was such a phenomenal single-player experience, and really brought a lot of people back, including myself. Even though I haven't put much work into the later Mortal Kombats, I did end up purchasing them. So there you go. All right. Now, a series that I first discovered on the Sega channel, and we're going to show you all three of them, that and I go on beyond that, but is the Strike series. So, Urban Strike, but the first one I ever played was Desert Strike, although I have the SNES one, because once again, Nintendo fanboy. And then after I played Desert Strike, I then learned about Jungle Strike. And for the purposes of this, I have footage of Urban Strike, so we're going to be showing that. But a really fun series that kind of just died on the vine in the PS1 era. There was a game called Nuclear Strike, which I've never played. I have picked it up. And then a game called Future Cop LA something, which is allegedly part of the Strike series, but it changed the way it was done, and it just disappeared after that. And it was such a shame because it was a fun arcadey type game where you control a helicopter in an isometric view that doesn't control the greatest, but you can go through, you can complete different objectives in a different myriad of ways, and is a fun series in my opinion. Surprisingly fun. One of the few things I did discover on the Sega channel was the Strike series, and cheap to this day. Very cheap to this day. Any of them. I'd recommend probably starting with Desert or Jungle Strike, but you can play it on the SNES or the Genesis, whichever one's your preferred system. Both are solid. I've played multiple entries on both systems, and to be honest, they're pretty identical. It's not like Aladdin or things of that nature. If you're playing it on one versus the other, you're gonna have a good time. So the Strike series, surprisingly good single player, in my opinion. Now, another one that I did speak about in my SNES two-player games is also a surprisingly fun single-player game, which, I don't know, I might be crazy, but I'm a big fan of Rampart, and the single-player in this game might be even more fun than the two-player, because they create this specialized mode where you are controlling the castle, but then you have to defend yourself against pirate ships, who are then landing and making harbor, and then the little humans will come up and essentially block your castle so you can't block them out. And there's several levels. There is several levels of this. And I remember this was something that my dad used to play all the time. I was never very good at it. I didn't get into it that much, but it was always something that I had in the back of my head that like, yeah, that must have been fun. That must have been pretty cool. And capturing the footage for the two-player game, I then just jumped into the one-player to remind myself how it was, and yeah, it's a blast. It's a blast. So who would have thought? Rampart has a lot of mileage, and I know there's ports of it on other systems, but really, I mean, this is a very solid game all around. Well worth having, and still, like I said, pretty dang cheap. All right. Another one on kind of the heels of Mortal Kombat 9, which maybe this is where Mortal Kombat got their ideas, was the Subspace Emissary in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Now, it was really nice to see them link together all the different Nintendo characters, because in Melee, they sort of introduced an adventure mode, which kind of gave you a little bit of platforming, a little bit of exploration with the characters, but in Subspace Emissary, they just threw all balls to the wall. And I remember when Smash Bros. 4 came out on the Wii U, the fact that Subspace Emissary wasn't being included was one of the biggest negatives until the game actually came out, and then everyone kind of forgot about it because the game was so solid, which led us to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. And unfortunately, you know, that's one of the things that they had to leave on the scrap heap. But Subspace Emissary was a lot of fun, getting to see all of the kind of love letters to the different series, how they interacted, how they involved themselves throughout the course of the storyline. Getting each character got its due. You know, with a huge roster like that, it's surprising. And also, side note, I don't know if you noticed, my copy of Brawl is still sealed. Once again, I never owned a Wii. Back when it was current. I never owned a Wii, but I bought a damn copy of Twilight Princess, and I bought a copy of Super Smash Bros. Brawl, and I think that was it. Those were the two games I bought while the Wii was current, and obviously I never opened it. Everyone owned the damn thing, so I never needed to open my copy. Even my little brother, who had a Wii, bought a copy of Smash Bros. Brawl, and to be honest, it's not a great game. By far my least favorite Super Smash Bros., although it has one of my favorite modes in the whole series, being Subspace Emissary, and probably, in my opinion, the only reason why you should ever go back and play Brawl now that Ultimate is out. Alright, moving to another game on the Genesis. I know, some Genesis love here. What do you know? And another game that I found out through the Sega channel. You know, it wasn't all a complete waste of money, and that is Risk. I know, how is this a one-player game? Well, when I was a kid, I loved board games, I still do, and I loved playing Risk. And if you remember back in the day, finding a bunch of people willing to play Risk with you was impossible. Well, this game actually allowed you to do it in a pretty nice facsimile, against computers, mind you, but still in a decent enough way of doing it, where you could set it up and actually play through a game. I think it's 2-player, yeah, if I remember, it's 1 to 6-player actually, but you're taking turns. But I played it with my dad, and we had some fun with it. And it's just a fun way to play Risk. Not the, you know, there's far better ways now, but still, this is a cheap Genesis game, and it's simplified more so than some of the later entries, which, ironically enough, the next game I'm going to talk about is also Risk. It is Risk on the PS1. You see a trend here? Yeah, I love Risk. Now, the fun thing about this Risk game is that it introduced the classic mode, so you can play it normally like you did on the Genesis, though I didn't find this one as much fun. It was a little bit more cumbersome, load times, things of that. But they introduced a new form of Risk where you have commanders and generals, and then they get a number by the name the more powerful they got. And the funny thing is, to this day, I don't really know how that mode worked, but it was still fun. You know, it was still fun to play, and launched me into my later adulthood to get heavily into more tabletop games of Risk like 2210, Game of Thrones Risk, things of that nature, which then led to me and my buddy Sean playing Gloomhaven and all the other ridiculous, epic and intricate board games, mechs and minions, whatnot. So yeah, it all started off with Risk, and some surprisingly good single-player games for the Genesis and PS1 contributed to that as well. Alright, well, we still got plenty more. Buckle on in. Let's talk about another PS1 game. Now, this is another fighting game. It's the third entry in the series. It's the first one I picked up. And I think, like a lot of people, we picked this up because it wasn't just a fighting game. It had a ton of optional content and extra modes, because back in the PS1 era, you actually got extra modes in your game without having to buy DLC. And that is Tekken 3. Now, Tekken 3 not only had a really fun ball mode, like a volleyball mode where you would hit it back and forth, and that was the only way you could damage your opponent, but there was a straight-up beat-em-up mode where you could play as any of the characters in the game and go through, I think it was called Force Mode. So you go through Force Mode, every once in a while you would get a named character, one of the actual combatants who would come in and you have to beat them up, but it's just... This was an unexpected mode. At the time, this was just a port of the arcade, and they put in all this extra love and care, and was a great time to be alive, to be honest. It was really nice picking up a frickin' fighting game, especially at the time. This was after I'd bought multiple copies of Street Fighter and multiple copies of Mortal Kombat. This was my first Tekken game. And not only to get a Tekken game where it's a fun fighting game against friends, but then you actually have stuff you can do by yourself. And the Force Mode was pretty damn fun. Not perfect, definitely not a great beat 'em up, but this something extra that was surprisingly decent in my opinion. Let's move a little bit more modern, though it's a modern remake, and you're gonna hate me for this, but I am not sorry. One of the most fun things I've ever done for this channel is playing Night Trap with my wife on the PS4. The anniversary re-release. Now I reversed the cover. Now, let me be clear, I'm specifically talking about the re-release, not the original. The reason why this is surprisingly fun is they did something huge where they addressed probably one of the biggest gripes of the game, which was having to move from the monitors to see what's going on in the other rooms. Well, in the new re-release, when you put your little icon on the monitor at the bottom to see the different screens, it would show you a preview of what was going on, almost like a picture-in-picture closed captioning of it. I didn't know that's not how the original was. I thought that all the games were like that, but no, in the original it was just a blank screen, so you would have to constantly click back and forth, which yeah, I could see that getting super annoying. With this, it was a blast. We had a great time, surprisingly so, and going into it, that's probably the biggest surprise, is because I expected it to be terrible. We had a great time. We had a really, really fun time playing through Night Trap. The anniversary, go figure, right? Alright, speaking of the PS4 era, this one is just got to be mentioned because the first one was Xbox exclusive, and in my opinion, a huge disappointment. It was always online, only multiplayer, nothing to it. So for the sequel, Respawn really pulled it off, came out with an amazing game that no one played because no one cared by this point, but still, you'll hear a lot of people say it, Titanfall 2 has a very, very fun campaign mode. Very, very fun campaign mode. Sadly, had the first game came out with a mode like this, it could have done so much better for the series. I mean, obviously, the Respawn people went on to make Apex Legends, and that's where EA's keeping them at night now. But Titanfall 2 was a lot of fun. You go through it, and it has time travel and different augmented reality and just a really zany campaign that, especially at this time when everything was just so heavily focused on Call of Duty, and that's when Halo really fell off, and I think it's right around when Destiny came out. Everyone was taking itself so seriously. This was just a game that it felt like fun. You know, it felt like a little bit more Time Splitters-esque, a little bit more, I don't know, a little less like, oh yeah, we're Gears of War, and a little bit more tongue-in-cheek. Unfortunately, it didn't sell that well. I don't know if there's even a 3 in the plans or anything like that, but still, Super cheap game. I have reviewed it on the channel if you want to see my extended thoughts. Great campaign, worth checking out, definitely worth your time. All right, we got a few more here. I think we got, let's see, let's go ahead and let's look at this one. So my last one, talking about the N64, this is a game I talked about in my fun multiplayer games for the N64, but it has a fantastic single player as well, which I just love to talk about, and that's Bomberman 64. I can't say enough good things about this game. Much like, much like Rampart, or much like some of the, like, you'll see repeats. You know, if you get to this point, we're going to see repeats on the channel. Bomberman 64 has a very fun single player. You go through different biomes. At the time when this came out, you only had Mario 64, really. This was still, I want to say, an earlier release in 96, maybe early 97. So at the time, the N64 maybe had a total of 20 releases in North America. I mean, I literally had every single release for the N64 when it was current until Killer Instinct Gold, just because I didn't want another fighting game. It didn't appeal to me. But Bomberman 64, fun collectibles, fun methodology getting through the levels. I hadn't been familiar with the Bomberman series, so really it was just a great jumping off point in general. And unfortunately, this was a risk I took on a property that paid off. But then moving into the ones like Castlevania and things of that nature for the N64 didn't really pay off. But this one did. So it set it off on a good trend and made me trust doing it over and over again. All right. This one is a GameCube release. It's the sequel to another game, which I think this might even be the third game in the series. But it uses the Aki engine, the AKI engine. And let's not wait. It is Def Jam Fight for New York. Now, you could say Def Jam Fight for New York or Vendetta here. Both of them have fantastic single players. I played more of this one, and I enjoyed this one a lot. And just, I wasn't a huge hip-hop guy, so I didn't know all the rappers, but I knew the names. So I knew who, I knew who Redman or Method Man or Wu-Tang Clan. I knew the names. I didn't know, like Dr. Dre. So just seeing them and getting to beat them up as the mystery character or getting my ass kicked by them. And the way it worked is you only won by KO. There was no pinning. But it had the same feel as No Mercy. And because WrestleMania 18 sucked so much, jumping into this was such a treat. And a phenomenal multiplayer game too, but I think I may have played the single player more on these. And so, unfortunately, this game is super expensive now, and I'd love to see them re-release it, but Vendetta, I think, is still pretty cheap. It also depends on the system you get it, but yeah, highly, highly recommend checking those out. And then we just got a bonus one. So this one I'm talking about more because people hate the game so much for being short, and just keep it briefly here, and that is The Order 1886. Now, I've done a full video on this. It is very good, in my opinion, and it's nice that it's only a 6 to 8 hour game. I was excited when it came out. This was one of the earlier PS4 releases, exclusive. It was supposed to be a series, but it died on the vine. It does have a weird ass ending, like anticlimactic. They don't really get anything done. It has all this lore built into it. But as far as just a stripped down game with what they've done and the kind of the universe, it's very steampunk inspired. It's interesting. It's an interesting campaign. I like using the Knights of the Round, Galahad and all those things, and having them be legacy names. They're used by the Secret Order, and you're going after, I think, werewolves, if I remember. I don't know if there's vampires in it, but just a fun game. Check out the video I've done on it if you want to know more, but this one is dirt cheap. I mean, I think I got this for $10 when it was still new in like 2015. So I can't imagine you can't find that for stupid cheap now. And if you have a PS5 or PS4, check it out. Give it a shot. It's quick too, which in my opinion is a bonus. All right, well, there you go. That is a glut of single player games that in my opinion need some more love and are actually fun and, more fun than they have any right to be. So let me know what you thought. Let me know if you've experienced with these games, if you agree with me, if you disagree. Let me know if you've tried my GoldenEye controls, because I'm telling you, if you try it on the Switch, change it that way, it's not that hard. You can save a preset, it takes 5 seconds, and the system even prompts you to switch it. But yeah, as a reminder, I release a new video every Tuesday. Thank you all for liking and subscribing to the channel. Thank you all to the new viewers. It's so great hearing from you and seeing your comments. As a reminder, I have a Patreon, so if you want to get some more inside information or kind of shape the content of the show, check it out, the link in the description down below. Otherwise, it's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.